Hello everyone and welcome to another exciting edition of the Jet Lagged and Loving It podcast. My name is David Pustansky and once again I'm joined by my fabulous partner in crime, Rachel Jayne. I don't know why I always refer to you as that. I said it the first time. But this is the travel podcast. I was going to say travel vlog series because that's what I say on our video version of it, but this is the spin-off from the travel vlog series and it's the podcast version. How are you today, Rachel?
Yeah, I'm good. I'm
excellent. Rachel is good. Yeah, so today we've had a brief discussion about what we're going to talk about, and we've decided that we're going to talk about road trips in America. So the United States of America, we've both been there individually, as we discussed on our debut episode of all of the places we've been to, but also we've been there. How many times have we been there together? 3 times? Okay, so Rachel forgets this is a somewhat audio-based podcast, and she's purely performing for whoever will watch the video version of this with a very decisive nod. Can we get an audio confirmation on your part there, Rachel?
Yeah, I only nodded because there's quite a big delay on this, so I thought nodding would be easier than not interrupting you. But no, I can now make a big speech about saying yes.
Was that your big speech?
Yeah.
Excellent. Okay, so road trips in America. Rachel, what are the things people should know if they're planning a road trip out in America? What's your first thought?
All the cars and roads are really big. So if you get the tiniest car in America, that's like a medium-sized car in the UK. And then it's like really easy to park everywhere because all the parking spaces are designed for the massive SUV truck things. So then if you have like your little baby car, then it's really easy to park everywhere.
Yeah, and I suppose one of the good things about having a smaller car is if you're going to be driving in America for the first time and you're going to be like trying to get used to driving on the other side of the road and any of like the other changes which we can talk about driving out there, then having a smaller car does mean that you're not going to be in people's way too much if you're maneuvering incorrectly.
Yeah, but it does also mean that the big cars might not notice you quite as much.
And then they will
because
squash
they're not
you.
seeing tiny cars on the road. So there's pros and cons.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so let's just try and recap, just so like we won't just make this about how to drive in America, but what are the differences that we noticed on the road? So obviously you drive on the other side of the road compared to the UK is one.
Yeah, that's one. Also, that means that when you're on a motorway, so they call them a highway, the right-hand lane is the slow inside lane and the left-hand lane is the fast lane. So
yeah, things are inverted. Now, okay, you're going to have to help me through with this. What is the thing where at a stop sign, and they have so many stop signs, not just traffic lights, but they have stop signs, you always have to stop, but then you can turn right at a stop sign, is that correct?
You can turn right on a red light. At a stop sign, you just have to stop, and then everyone kind of goes in turn based on when they pulled up. The stop signs are a bit confusing. I prefer more of a decisive, can I go or not, rather than edge forward and hope no one else decides it's their turn. But yeah, turning red on a red light is really weird. In America, I really struggle to get used to that.
Yeah, because okay, so for example, at the stop signs, if a car pulled up to a stop sign before you and they've stopped because it's a stop sign, and then you are the opposite side of the road and you stop, if like 3 more cars came up behind that one before it moves off, technically you were second in the queue, but they're all going to go, aren't they?
I don't know. I can't remember. I think we never quite worked it out, so we just generally stopped until it was clear and then went. But that's only on like the smaller roads, a bit more like out in the countryside, except they don't really call it countryside, but it's not the outback either. What do you call it in America?
The Wild West, the country. I don't know.
Yeah, I guess.
Although, where have we been actually? So let's just so everyone knows where we have driven. We went to California and did a road trip,
Yeah, that was the first one.
and then we had a road trip in Florida.
Yeah, although that one I view less as a road trip, that was more sort of driving between different destinations rather than just driving long distances for the sake of driving long distances. But
Well, okay, but okay. So we'll get on to California soon, where we definitely did drive distances for the sake of driving a long distance. But I do distinctly remember that I think when we were going to Kennedy Space Center in Florida, there was a 246-mile journey. Is that correct? And there was, or is it 146? I think it was 246-mile journey with 243 miles without a turn.
yeah, that's the great thing about sat navs in America is it just says just keep going in a straight line for hundreds of miles. Whereas in the UK, you'd never have that because there would always be a roundabout or a set of traffic lights to turn out or something. Whereas
Yeah,
in the
exactly.
US, you can literally just have hundreds of miles of straight road. Just, yeah, I really enjoy driving on roads like that.
Yeah, like it's fun. Like you have to make sure like you keep like awake and things. And like the interesting thing, we'll get back to all of these bits in a moment, but I will just throw in here is that like if one person's driving, then the other person, they might fall asleep because it's just like doing nothing. But like I think we both experience times where it's like the other person is like, you need to speak to me to stay awake. You need to make sure I stay awake, sort of situation, because you can just zone out on the freeways, the highways.
Yeah, I think from what I remember, so many of the roads had such amazing scenery around that it was quite easy to stay awake just to be able to look around and look at the scenery.
Yeah. Although there was definitely like that 243-mile one. I'm sure you had a brief nap in that at least one point.
Not while driving.
No, I was driving that one. I was driving that one. You weren't. Although I swear to, we can go into this story as well. It's just jumping all over the place. We'll get this back in on route in a moment. No pun intended. But I'm sure, like driving through California when we did one of the longer days, like my eyes were just zoning out, and there was at least once where you're like, David, and I was like, I'm awake, like this. But there was at least one time where I was just like, you just zone out. It's difficult not to.
Yeah, let's move on from the subject of when you almost crashed the car.
No, I didn't almost crash. I'm just making an exciting story for the podcast. This may or may not be fictional. Okay, so as well as Florida and California, we had one other road trip in America, didn't we?
We did. We went to the north around Washington State. Actually, we went to Alaska on that trip, but we didn't drive in Alaska, so just Washington State for the road trip.
Yeah. So other places that we mentioned this in the last one about places we've individually been. I'd been to New York and Los Angeles before, but I didn't drive then. And you'd been to like 30 days of everywhere, but you weren't driving then, were you?
Yes, I did a just over a month route across America, but did that all by train, which was really amazing in a different way. Like you got to spend 36 hours sat on a train looking out at the scenery, which obviously you wouldn't spend 36 hours driving.
Very
But it
true.
did mean that you didn't have the freedom to stop off at a viewpoint. You couldn't tell the train to suddenly stop because that's a nice view and you wanted to take a photo. Whereas when you're driving yourself, you can do that very often.
And
But then that also means that driving anywhere takes 3 times as long as it should do because you keep stopping off for photos.
very true. And in fact, so this kind of brings us back to the start of our first road trip was in California, and we took a couple of pit stops not long into our road trip. And I think we both may be able to, like, for anyone watching on the video version of this, if you are listening onto the audio version, you should totally keep doing that. But if you do check out the video version, then you will get some bonus backdrop photos that we can add in. Now, I'm going to have to lean over just because you'll be able to see in the background to describe it mainly for our audio people, is that we both, I think, oh, Rachel, is that? What is that you've got there? Is that a whale or is that the otters?
It's a sea otter.
I can't tell from there. It's like a big
That's his
squiggly
head.
mess. Okay.
Head there.
So Rachel is the first pit stop and I'm the second pit stop. I've got a humpback whale behind me. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Okay. And Rachel, what kind of otter is that? Just a sea otter?
Yeah, California sea otters. We saw them when we stopped off, and we saw lots more in Monterey.
Yeah, we did indeed. I also remember when we stopped off to see the sea otters. Did you know they might be there?
I knew that there's a chance of seeing them along the coast. I don't think, and I think I'd researched this particular area was known to them, but as with any wild animal, you never guarantee to see it. So it's always really exciting when you actually do.
Yeah, no, it was very cool. But okay, so I was going to say, I remember when we stopped for that pit stop, because you'd done the driving up to that point. I felt like, okay, can I just try driving the American car? And I was like, ka-chunk and stop and stuff like this, because I wasn't used to this particular car, and the brakes were very firm. So it took a little bit of getting used to. But you'd done a little bit of prep to get ready for driving in America, hadn't you?
Yeah, I practiced driving an automatic car in the UK, which I mean, I'm used to driving a manual car, so driving an automatic becomes quite easy. But there's still a few times where you sort of instinctively reach for the gear stick and there's just nothing there.
Yeah, I've never driven a automatic before, and I love it. I happily always drive an automatic. It's like Mario Karts. It's just like a go-kart. Okay, so our second pit stop. Are you on the second pit stop, or is that the third?
I think I'm on to the third now because
Okay, so
you're coming second.
yeah, I'm the second, so I'll just lean over so you can see the humpback whale. Now, once again, why did you think we should stop there?
I mean, it was like a viewpoint area, but we weren't expecting to see whales there at all. It was more just, it was a really lovely view. So we thought we'd look out. And then there was like that kelpie patch, wasn't there, where there was like a bit of stuff in the water.
Yeah.
And just beyond that, I could see something sort of moving occasionally in a few splashes. So just kind of kept looking and then realised actually it's a whale that keeps coming up. Yeah, which was just so unexpected and so amazing to see.
So, but you do get native wild whales in that area, don't you?
Yeah, they migrate up the coast. I think they spend the winter in the south where the water's warmer for like their breeding season, have their babies there, and then they migrate up the coast to the colder waters in the summer where there's a lot more food, and then they just really stock up on food in the colder northern waters in the summer.
Okay, so just so I understand this, because Rachel is clearly the whale expert amongst us here. Seem like the expert on many of these things. But do you ever get whales around England? Because occasionally you hear about something's washed up on a beach and then they're struggling to rescue it or something like this. But do you get many whales around the UK?
You don't. It's not on like a humpback or blue whale migration route like the Pacific coast of the US is. One of the biggest things you'll get on the UK on their migration routes is basking sharks. You can see them off the coast of Cornwall in the summer. There's also plenty of dolphins, common dolphins, bottlenose dolphins, toothed whales occasionally as well. Like further up, when you go further out into the Atlantic, then obviously there's more likely to see whales. You can also see killer whales off the top of Scotland as well sometimes, which is really exciting.
So what you're saying is we didn't need to go to California to see these?
Well, for humpback whales we did, yeah.
Okay.
That was one of their main migration routes there.
It's an interesting thing about seeing, just like, because this is the amazing thing that you can do on a road trip, like you said. You can just see a viewpoint and decide to stop, whereas if you're in any kind of public transport, you're at the mercy of whoever the driver is, whether or not there's any planned pit stops. You can't just suddenly decide, oh, we're going to see if there are any whales or otters or dolphins or things like this. But we took this third stop, which is the one behind you now, and I don't think we saw anything particular there. My biggest memory of that is that there was terrible, like, strong wind, and I was very worried that we were going to get blown off the edge of this cliff.
But yeah, this wasn't a specific wildlife spot. It was just a really lovely view, as you can see.
Yeah, so there's like the cliffs, and we can see the beach, and there was quite a few people stopped there, wasn't there?
Yeah, I mean, all along that road it was fairly busy, and it was a really lovely sunny day. So a lot of people probably had a similar idea that it would be nice to drive down the coast.
Okay, so let's just before we say about like some more of our experiences, let's just say if like a few of the things it's a good idea to have on a road trip with you. So obviously you can have all of your luggage, and so you don't have to carry it. You do have to think of safety if you're stopping anywhere. Any tips for that, Rachel?
You're going to be far better at talking about that because I'll just pull over anywhere and get out and take photos. So as long as you stop someone with a nice view, that's all I really care about.
Okay, so if you're going to go on a road trip in America, you know, you always want to make sure you got one of these. I'm joking. I've got a toy gun here. For anyone listening on the audio version of the podcast, like I'm sure lots of people in America do carry guns because we know that they do. If you're going on a road trip in America, do not take a gun because you're not going to know how to handle it, and that just makes it sound scary. But in terms of safety, just make sure that you don't have any things on display. Make sure you've got the keys in your pocket at all times. Don't leave them in the ignition. Don't just like when you get out the car, don't just open the door and walk off because people might try and come along. You just don't want to advertise that you're open for business, basically.
This is all something very paranoid. It was completely safe and beautiful driving along that road. No, we had no issues whatsoever.
I know, Rach. I know. I'm just trying to make this helpful to so people watching this can think, what do they need? Make sure you've got a good supply of water, like drinks, with you, because if you were to break down at any point, then you want to make sure you know you've got food and drink. Is that a fair one to say?
Yeah, but again, it was so busy along that road that it wasn't like we were
I'm not
isolated
just
in the middle of
talking about that
nowhere.
road. We went along lots of roads.
Yeah, there were some other roads that were a bit more deserted. So, yeah, it's always good to have water.
There were. I think one time when we were in Seattle, just to we'll skip back, but just because it's relevant, we stopped for like a kind of picnicky thing, and we could see some eagles and things. Do you vaguely remember this? And there was like a farm thing in or something like a gated business or something like off to one side. Does this ring any bells? And there was like a big cavern or something. We saw eagles. No, okay. Well, anyway, that was quite deserted. We didn't like people would go past us every 10 or 15 minutes, like one car at a time. And there
Oh,
was
you
one
mean the
time.
Mount St. Helens Day?
Sorry, say that again.
You mean the Mount St. Helens Day?
Yeah, it would have been that day. And there was one point where we went to a viewpoint and there were some people that kind of looked like yokels or hillbillies or something like this. And they kind of had the whole wrong turn mountain men look, where it's like, if we don't get back in our car, they are going to come and eat us.
Yeah, that didn't happen at all.
It
The
did.
only thing that happened on that lunch stop is because we were at Mount St. Helens. It was sort of the end of April, so it was just before the season where most things weren't open. It was actually the visitor centre that was shut, and we just because we couldn't get in the car park there, we just pulled up outside it. And it was the people who were working at the visitor centre that you were then scared were going to tell us off for parking
Hang
there.
on,
I think
hang on,
that's
hang
it.
on. I think, Rachel, we've got some crossed wires here, I'm sure, because there was definitely one bit where there was like a big bridge or something. And we were like sure that they were up to no good. Do you not recall this?
I remember the bridge and I remember the views. I just don't remember having any issues with any people there at
No, we
all.
didn't have an issue. It's just like the people looked quite scary.
Well, I wasn't scared of them, but I'm sure they were
Right.
terrifying.
I'm coming across really bad now, and you're coming across like really brave. But there was some scary mountain men. If you've seen The Hills Have Eyes, you'll know what I mean.
They were
And
just
I was like, we need
maintaining
to
the
just.
fence at the visitor centre.
No, it wasn't at the visitor centre. There was
No.
some other goings on. I'm trying to see if
Well, either way, behind me now is one of the views of Mount St. Helens that we got before we got attacked by this mysterious people who I didn't really realise were there. So
right.
it's a lovely.
Okay, well that's fair enough, Rachel. But so whilst you're telling everyone, okay, so whilst I'm looking for this photo, just tell everyone a little bit about We stayed at motels often. Tell people any survival tips for how do you choose somewhere safe to stay when you're on a road trip.
I mean, I'm a planner, so I tend to book things in advance. I know a lot of people on road trips will just drive up to the nearest one, but I tend to book things in advance, so then you know where you're heading that evening and you know where to go. And yeah, they're motels really. They're usually 2 stories, sometimes 1 story, where you just park outside the door and go into the room.
Right.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of them where we've arrived quite late because the driving took a bit longer than we were anticipating. But again, that's probably to do with the number of photo stops that I insist on stopping for.
You do. Okay, so hang on 1 second. Hold that thought. I
This
can't.
photo better be worth it.
Okay. Oh, I think I just saw them. Who are these people? I don't know what this is. So this might be the photo. So, okay, there were some people. Can we see them? Right, that is one of them. Now, it's going to come across like I'm being mean. She looks kind of like a strange person. I'll move away just to protect her identity. But there were some people there, and all of them seemed like they'd escaped from like a circus or something. And when you're on a road trip in America, this is no disrespect to the people, I'm sure they're lovely, but you can just feel a bit unnerved. I can't believe I found a photo of them. So with that car, it's just like how many, and they were like picking up roadkill or all sorts. I might just be adding in this detail for dramatic effect now, but they were scary. And I was like, we can't stay here. We need to go. I knew I'd got a photo, Rachel.
I don't know what to say. They look like American people going about their day-to-day lives.
Wow, that's stereotyping if you're saying that you look like American people. Wow. Anyway, after Rachel's outburst,
America, so.
I know, I'm joking. Okay, so the other thing you need as well as a motel is food. And this is where, hold the thought, Rachel, David has got this covered. If you need to know what you have to do about food in America on a road trip, I have one word for you, and that is Denny's. So Denny's Diner is a place where you'll get probably hundreds or thousands of them across America. And they all obviously have the same menu, but I think they're like a franchise thing so that different people run their own individual Denny's, but they all offer up the same kind of foods. And you go to one of these because they're open 24 hours a day, so it doesn't matter if it's like midnight or if it's in the afternoon or whatever, you can get breakfast. And you can get like a peanut butter milkshake, and you can get some bacon cheddar tots and any kind of burger that you'd want. And you know that you're going to be in safe hands with the Denny's. What's your thoughts on food on the road?
No, Denny's has definitely saved us on multiple occasions. I mean, after a long day of driving, sometimes it's just nice to pull into somewhere and eat a massive burger. Their burgers really are amazing.
They were very good. Like, and lots of people listening to this, they're going to be like, "What, Denny's? You need to go to here or there." But if you want something where you're just going to drive along and you don't have time to be looking up the like the TripAdvisor reviews of every restaurant, you see a Denny's, you know what you're going to get. It's always going to be a Denny's, and you could stop at like a McDonald's or a KFC or any fast food thing. But if you want something that's a bit more home cooked feel, like that still has burgers and like fast food and stuff like that, Denny's is what I would say. Now, we didn't try a Wendy's, we didn't try an Arby's, and I'm sure there's some other things. But for me especially, because I'd heard about this on American programs and things, I was like, I know that Denny's will be safe. And so Denny's has a soft spot in my heart, at least.
We have had a lot of very nice Denny's meals.
Yeah. Well, okay. So
you could it's just driving along. There'll be like a sign like, "Oh, there's a Denny's," and then 5 minutes later, like, "Oh, there's another Denny's."
Yeah,
and it's something that I've only really discovered in America since doing the road trips, because I don't really remember seeing any Denny's in like inner cities, like in New York or in San Francisco. They're very much a sort of out of town road trip kind of thing, where you just drive up and park straight outside, walk in and eat your entire body weight in bacon cheddar tots, and then waddle back out to your car.
Well, that's what.
Classic American road trip.
Yeah, that's that's exactly what you want when you're on a road trip. So if you can find things, so even if it's like a steakhouse, or I'm trying to think what else you might see, like any Burger Kings and stuff like this, you know you'll be safe with it. You know that it's going to be like a professional organization to whatever degree. People might question that, but you know it's going to be something where it's like, okay, so in theory this is going to be safe for me to eat. Whereas if you go to somewhere that you've never heard of, you don't know what you might be run by the mafia for all you know.
Again, you're really not coming across well in this one.
Okay, good. So
So just to point out that whenever we've been on road trips, we have eaten at a lot of local restaurants, especially in Seattle. We were going along on the pier, weren't we, and Fisherman's Wharf in San Francisco.
what was the name of that chowder
there.
place?
I can't actually remember the names of many of these places. There was the lovely sourdough place in San Francisco as well, and the
Oh, I don't.
focaccia bakery.
Oh yes. Oh, sorry. In San Francisco, there was the place where you could get the focaccia bread, and we did that, and it was right near the place where they'd filmed Sister Act 2, wasn't it?
It was, yeah. It's a
So
tiny little bakery. It's just the
I will
focaccia is
head
just
back to
amazing.
San Francisco. So if you see behind me now, Rachel and I are becoming the Golden Gate Bridge. So we're an extension of it.
Yep.
And then when we were in Florida at the Florida Keys, there was a couple of really good fish restaurants, wasn't there?
Yeah, there's. I think one of them was called like the Fish House or something like simple like that. But it just had like massive portions of the mahi mahi. They're like quite sort of dense.
Mahi fish. And okay, so it sounds dodgy, but if you look up mahi mahi, it says it's dolphin fish, but it isn't eating dolphin.
We did double check that it wasn't actually eating dolphin.
Yeah, I would never eat a dolphin. They're too intelligent, aren't they?
Yeah, too cute.
Yeah, I really like dolphins. Okay, so are there? Okay, so we've spoke about when we went to Monterey and things. So we've covered that in our California road trip. Where did we go after Monterey? Was it just back to San Francisco?
Yeah, but then we actually stayed in San Francisco because we flew into San Francisco and then straight away got the car and drove down the coast. And then we went to San Francisco to actually stay there for a few days. And driving into San Francisco was a bit scary. Even I'll admit that was a bit scary because it was dark and really busy, and there were buses and trams, and it wasn't nice driving into San Francisco to get to the hotel. I'll admit that.
I felt so relieved, but also so depressed when we got to the hotel, just because within the prior 5 minutes, people bibbed at me probably 6-7 times, and I was just like, I'm going to get arrested in America. You know, they're going to take away my license, just because every maneuver I did driving into the city was apparently incorrect. But I had no idea.
Well, somehow we managed to avoid getting any fines or anything like that. We somehow managed to get away with it. We didn't crash into anyone or end up being run over by a tram or anything like that. So we did make it in one piece. It just was a little bit stressful. I mean, driving out wasn't so bad. I think
that was the next.
Driving out
that was in the morning, though, wasn't it?
Yeah.
So it wasn't like peak time, after work, busy hours kind of thing.
Yeah, that was another time where we ended up probably stopping and taking too many photos on the way back into San Francisco, so ended up arriving a lot later than we were intending to. We made it, and it's a story. It just wasn't the most enjoyable 20 minutes of driving.
Okay, so also just for people listening, because we can deep dive into any of these places perhaps in a future episode, but just so we don't skip over these places and not give each place its proper dues. Monterey, what are the recommendations, just for a few quick fire ideas of places to see in Monterey if you're on a road trip? You're planning a road trip.
Monterey Bay Aquarium is one of the most famous aquariums in the world. So that was really cool.
Yeah, well, it is now. It's been on this podcast. Monterey Bay Aquarium, you're welcome.
Yeah. I want to call it Fisherman's Wharf in Monterey, but I'm not sure if it was called the Fisherman's Wharf. But you remember that area?
Fairly sure it was.
Yeah, but that was just really nice. Nice restaurants and shops and things along there. But really, Monterey is just all about being by the sea. So
Yeah.
that's what I really remember is, walking along, we saw otters in the edge of the water. I think we saw seals and pelicans, and just really enjoy being by the sea.
Yeah. So if you check behind me now, you'll see it was Old Fisherman's Wharf. So you remembered well there, Rachel. And if I move one way or the other, then you can see it does say, ooh, where do I move? Monterey. I can't read the rest of it because it's behind me. And I can't look behind me because it's a green screen. So we'll just have to figure out what that says. But yeah, so what were the animals you'd see there?
Well, we saw the sea otters, we saw seals, we saw pelicans, lots of different animals there.
Yeah. I also remember, and this is one of the things you can check out on the Jet Lagged and Loving It episodes that we did, which covered Monterey, that there was like an arcade machine, which was like a love tester, where you'd hold it and it would tell you how much of a magnificent lover you are. And it like stole my quarter. And apparently I broke the machine. And when you watch on the video, you'll see that it was working when I started using it, but it broke as soon as I put my money in. So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, my main memory of Monterey is the otters, but you can remember breaking the machine if you want.
I also remember there was like a sign though, which said about all the different types of whales and dolphins and things that perhaps either you get in the world or that you'd see in the area.
Well, yeah, it's so much wildlife in that area. It's on the grey whales migrated up that coast as well. I think we were just a tiny bit too early for the grey whale migration there.
So what do you know? What type of time of year they'd be there?
Oh, you're quizzing me now. I mean, we were there in September, which, from what I'm aware of, was sort of near the start of their migration. But I'm probably going to get lots of people telling me I'm completely wrong on this, so I don't really want to.
Don't worry.
Because I'll get it wrong.
Okay, so San Francisco, what are the top things that we should check out there? Now, I can speak a little, I can throw a couple of things in here. And as I alluded to earlier, it was before we started, you have to book in advance, as I think you mentioned. Or no, this is what you said before we started, wasn't it? So if there are attractions and things that you know you want to go to, book in advance because you want to go to Alcatraz, which you've been to, Rachel, previously,
Yep.
but I have not because I did not know about booking in advance.
Yeah, that's one of the ones that you have to book. I think it's almost like a couple of months in advance for really busy seasons. So it's definitely worth checking out things like that to know about booking in advance.
Yeah.
But no, Alcatraz is cool. I mean, it smells of fish. That's my main memory of it. It's covered in seagull poo and it smells of fish.
Did you get to go into any of the prison cells?
Yeah, that was all really cool as well. But there was a lot of seagull poo.
Amazing. Okay,
Yeah.
so this is why we need to go back to San Francisco, just because I need to go to Alcatraz Island. But other than that, some cool things to do. They had, like, what was the name of the pier? Was it pier and then a number, 47 or something like this?
Pier 39.
39. And what was so special about Pier 39?
There were sea lions, and there's always sea lions on that pier. I think at different times of year you get different numbers of sea lions.
Yeah.
But no, I love them. They were just lolloping around. I think you've got a picture of the sea lions, I think.
Oh, I will find that. But as you can see behind Rachel, of course, there is the Golden Gate Bridge.
Yeah, that must be one of the most famous things in San Francisco.
So here we can just about see them. I've always got to work out. So that way you can see a sea lion behind me. And they were just sleeping and chilling out, and they bark at each other and they scratch their bums. They're very funny to watch.
Yeah, they're just like in Finding Nemo, where Finding Dory, isn't it, with the sea lions, where they're just laying on the rock and then they suddenly have a cigar with each other and just go and like flop back down again. They're very funny to watch.
Very accurate behaviour in Finding Dory. Great film. Okay, so we went on the Golden Gate Bridge, and it's a really long bridge if you're going to walk across the whole way, and we never did find out what was on the other side, which in a sense was a shame. When we go back there, then we can go all the way over. Oh, there
Um,
is also, so here's a no. I'll just quickly say secret tip before I forget it. You can find like the Lucasfilm headquarters there, and you're allowed to go in, but you're not allowed to film. And you can see loads of Star Wars props and memorabilia. So do that. Okay, what are you going to say, Rach?
on the other side of the Golden Gate Bridge is it's sort of a small town, separate town called Sausalito, which is
Sausalito sounds
quite nice.
saucy.
Got some cafes along the waterfront and quite a nice little place. So.
Yeah. Okay. Any other big things in San Francisco? Just to like say some of the bigger things that you should see. It's very hilly there, so if you were driving there, I think that would be like we were, but we didn't drive around the actual town or the city. We took like the tram or the bus or whatever. But I should imagine like hill starts would be an absolute nightmare if you were actually driving in the city.
Yeah, although when you're driving an automatic, then the car should take care of that for you.
True, but even then I'd feel a bit dodgy that you'd start to just go backwards.
Yeah, but there's like really windy street, isn't there? There's Lombard Street, I think it's called, which is like the steepest street in the world that just like zigzags its way up, and there's also like flowers on each side. So
Yeah,
that's
we
one of
saw
the
it.
famous things to see.
Yeah, we saw that from a distance, but it was a long way to walk, and there's a lot of hills. So make sure you take some good walking boots if you're going to San Francisco. Now, moving on from, we'll talk about San Francisco, I'm sure, in depth another time. But moving on from San Francisco, our next stop, I believe, was Yosemite National Park.
Yep, it was.
And to me, that was like an absolute highlight, which I thought before I went out there, I thought like, what are we doing going to, why aren't we just in San Francisco? There's going to be loads of amazing, cool things that we don't have time for in San Francisco. And Rachel, to her credit, wanted to go to Yosemite National Park. And to me, it was one of my favorite couple of days that we had out there.
Yeah, I mean, the pizza at the motel we stayed at was amazing.
Yes, Rachel, I love the fact that I just set up this whole thing saying about Yosemite National Park, and the first thing you come back with is pizza. So I was saying about how Rachel has influenced and changed me, and then I think the reverse has happened, so that Rachel's first response was about pizza. But let's talk about the pizza.
It was such good pizza, and it was just, massive and yummy.
It was ginormous. Like, if you had to like genuinely show it, I'd say it was about like this size in comparison. Would you agree?
Yeah, because it had like the crust was like, oh, like things weird, but like the crust was about that thick. So it had all like the cheesy bites all around the crust as well.
Did it have cheesy bites around the crust? I couldn't remember that, to be honest.
I think so. I think it was just pure calories, and we were considered because it was so warm when we were in Yosemite. We could sit outside on our balcony and eating it, and that's when we saw the skunk walking past as well. So
yeah, we saw a skunk.
Really cool.
That was the only skunk we saw.
Yeah.
But we did see lots of other wildlife. Now, one of the things that we saw, which was an absolute highlight, is we'd hoped we'd see a bear whilst we were in the national park. And we were basically walking to head out because we were only going to be there for the one full day at the actual park. And just as we were leaving, we saw some deer just sort of like run across in front of us. And then... that was a setup for you to take over, but then we saw a little bear chasing them, basically. Well, they wasn't chasing them. They were running away from it because they were like, oh, it's a bear. And then there was just like this little bear, probably about 10 or 15 foot in front of us. And we were taking photos. A few other people were taking photos. Oh, Rachel has a bear behind her. There he is.
I found the bear.
There's the little bear. But how much danger were we actually in, do you think, potentially?
There were loads of people around, so I don't think we were in any danger. I think it was more... I just don't know how it had got there, to be honest, because it was right next to like a busy path and the road.
Well, it was actually only a 5 minutes walk from where there was like the chalets or the accommodation for people, wasn't there?
Yeah, so I don't think he really meant to be in that place. He definitely shouldn't have been.
No, but then we saw a couple of park rangers who'd got like, I'm not sure if they've got shotguns or just dart guns or something, but they'd got
I
things
like
that,
to think they were just tranquilizer guns. That's what I tell myself.
yeah. Oh no, so I think the bear was absolutely fine, but I think it's okay to tell this story. You know, this can be an edit point if you don't want it in there. So there was like the guy on the radio trying to work out what was happening because of the bear, and then like another one came along and walked off into the distance. We're like, oh wow, we saw a bear, and as we then went along, because it was all just mountains around us, we just heard kaboom, and then after the kaboom, we heard roar, like this, and we're like, the little bear is fine, the little bear's fine. But I think what they were doing was just herding it away, because there's no way the park rangers were going to hurt the bear unless there was some absolutely life or death situation, and we didn't hear of anything to that effect. So I think it was just, you need to go, bear, bang into the air, and the bear was like, I'm going, and ran away.
Yeah, I think it was just a warning shot because the bear was very close to a very sort of heavily populated area. As you say, it was one of the main paths where the some of the chalets were, so it's not a good place for a bear to be because he's bound to get into trouble and start eating things he shouldn't eat. So definitely
Yeah.
better for him to run away back into the mountains where he was safe.
Also, another thing that was cool out there is we were jumping around in a waterfall, but it was unoccupied by water.
Yeah, that's one of the things, because Yosemite is actually really famous for its massive waterfalls. But because we were there in September and it had been a really hot summer, and I think they were in the middle of a drought when we were there, it meant that actually all the waterfalls had dried up and there was a massive forest fire risk when we were there.
Well, do you know what? We actually saw evidence of that, didn't we?
Huh?
We saw evidence of the forest fire. Didn't we see that things were burnt, or was there anything still smoking or burning or something?
Yeah, as we were driving through the park, we did. There was a part where the trees were lightly burned, just sort of one patch. But whether that was from a wild forest fire or whether it was from one of their sort of controlled burning areas, I'm not quite sure. But there were definitely forest fires in the area, and they watered the waterfalls. So
I think some guy, when we came out of a Walmart, like he works in Walmart, he was warning us something about that, wasn't he? Can't remember.
yeah, there was some weird guy when we said we were on our way to Yosemite. He was like, "Oh, it's all on fire there. You can't go there." So we just said okay, and then went back to the car and drove there anyway, and it was fine.
Yeah. Yeah, it was absolutely fine. Okay, so the next tip I will give to any of our viewers or listeners is, if you're going on any of these kind of road trips, of course you want to have lots of cameras and lots of batteries and lots of memory cards to be able to take lots and lots of photos. But most importantly, if you're going to a national park, please, for heaven's sake, make sure you take a thermal camera with you. You want to get like thermal, heat vision, predator style images of any of the wildlife out there. If there's any like bobcats or mountain lions roaming about, you will be able to see them, you know, because they might be able to see you if they're hiding in bushes, but you'll be able to see their body heat. So, you know, it's just about keeping safe. Would you agree with that, Rachel?
No, I think thermal camera is completely useless and pointless. And it's much better to just use a normal camera because then you can actually see what you're taking a photo of. But you
Unbelievable.
know, people like toys, then you can take your toys along.
Well, I got some thermal image footage of the bear, which I was quite pleased to get. So, you know, basically.
I got a photo of the bear.
I got photos too. You want to make sure you've got like, okay, so just so people understand the kind of kit I take with me on any of our trips. I'll take like I'll have my phone so I can take good photos on that and do vlogs and everything on that. But I'll also take like a stills camera. If they were easy enough to carry, then I would take two, one for stills, one for footage, but you can't be too excessive, obviously. You want to take a thermal camera, and you want to take a good like 360-degree camera so you can just get some 360 like virtual imaging. Would you agree, Rach?
No.
Excellent. But also, I've got a camera that can go underwater and film. So you want one of them?
Okay, so I agree that a phone is useful and a camera and an underwater camera. That's kind of where I draw the line.
Okay, so I might have like another 3 or 6 things compared to Rachel, but still each to their own. So now we're going to come on to our unnecessary part of the road trip, which has been a hotly debated factor between myself and Rachel of this road trip. Because next we went to Lake Tahoe. And it took us 8 hours to drive there after Yosemite National Park. Now, according to Google Maps, it was only going to take us 4 hours, but I think it took 8, didn't it?
Yeah, I still don't quite understand why it took us quite so long to get there.
Because I do. It's because Rachel wasn't willing to slow down around the edges of mountains. And
maybe we should get there quicker then.
Yeah, we'd get there quicker, but you want to get to a destination like by following the roads, not over the edge of it. So I was like, slow down, Rachel, and eventually we got there, and we were both so tired. After about 1 hour on like the beach of the lake, we sort of went back to just to rest at our room. I went on a little trip to get some KFC, which was cool. And then that was us done for the night. And then the next morning we had about 1 hour walking around, and then we had about an 8-hour drive back to San Francisco.
Well, when you put it like that, but I mean, it's because we got there about an hour before sunset, so we got to see the lovely sunset, and then it was just dark, so we couldn't really do anything more. But I'm still really glad that we went and saw it, and it was a really beautiful lake, and the drive there was also amazing. It's not all about the destination. I always think that's important.
Sometimes it's about the journey.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the journey there was really amazing, driving through the mountains and just such isolated roads. So I'm very happy that we did it.
Okay, so that brings up an interesting thing which we haven't covered on this. And perhaps we can speak about some of our other places, because this has become a bit more of the Californian road trip one with some other.
I think it's pretty much the end of the episode now, to be honest.
Yeah, but let's just say this, because it is going to be relevant for people. If you're like driving and you're a couple and you're driving together, or imagine if if we'd got kids, Rach, just put that thought in your head for a moment, right? But imagine if you're a family driving. No! Imagine if you were Rachel's running away. Oh dear. So I might just have to take on this bit all on my own since Rachel's run away. I'm just going to put a picture behind us. Let's find something. This was from Florida. So we're reaching the sunset of this episode. So Rachel's still gone. I was going to say, but if you're a couple driving together, or if you were like a family, or there was a group of you on a road trip, then inevitably, Rachel, if you're not going to come back for this, then it's not going to really work. But I was going to say, you're going to get some sense of frustrations, some sense of tension in the car. And so I was going to give us some tips on how you manage this. So very early on in our road trip in California, and we made sure to do the same when we were in Florida and in Seattle, we sort of like set the ground rules. And it's like, right, so if one of us is driving and the other one is like navigating, and by all means take a sat nav. Don't just go out there and think you're going to follow a map or follow the street signs. Take a sat nav from the UK. You can get like the American maps on it, or for wherever you want. But like follow that. But also, there is one other story we're going to have to tell. But you can't 100% trust it, so you will have to have a sense of someone being the navigator. But understand that when someone says like, okay, we're going to take the next exit, or we're going to turn here, or change lanes, or someone's helping changing lanes, that between the person driving and the person navigating, the passenger, there's going to be times where you're going to end up like, no, I am taking it. No, I didn't do that. And you're going to seem like you're annoyed at each other. So that's why very early on, just set the ground rule that when someone's driving and you're having to make quick decisions and quick reactions, that even if it sounds like voices are raised or like someone might be annoyed or frustrated, it's never meant. Would you agree with that, Rachel?
Yeah, I think you make it sound like we argued the whole time, whereas I don't actually remember that at all. But
what? All I remember is you like shouting at me. It's like, well, like it's no point just saying that way. Which way is that way? Because I might be pointing directly at it. And so the other thing we established early on, I'm going to be in so much trouble after this podcast now, aren't I? But the other thing we established early on is Rachel has this down pat, so she's very good at this. Whereas I had to like learn this. Is you'd say like after that silver car, or follow that red car there, or second exit, and you'd have to speak a little bit more like they would on an actual sat nav, just so that the instructions are very, very clear. And I think that's very sensible that you came up with as an idea. Would you agree?
Well, yes, because your directions are usually over there or that way, which doesn't really make sense when you don't know what that or this there means.
See, and so okay, so just for my defense, imagine what Rachel just said there, but just like with an extra little bit of bite to it. And that's what I mean about sometimes it's like, well, your direction's just that way or there. And no, and you were completely right. So I had to learn, right, what kind of instructions make this crystal clear, and you were very, very good at it. And I would say that you were a better navigator than I was. But I would say I was the better driver than you were. Is that fair? Rachel doesn't agree with that.
This is probably the point where I need to disappear off the screen again.
No, okay. I wouldn't say. I'd definitely say Rachel was the better navigator. I wouldn't say which one of us was the better driver. I think we both did very well. I really enjoyed driving in America. So I think in Florida I did slightly more of the driving. Though, is that fair?
Yeah, I think he did, because that was more sort of driving to a particular theme park, in which case the navigation was more important. So it tended to be that you would drive and I'd be looking out for the street signs and actually like where the entrance is.
Or it was that one time where it was like 243 miles going straight and we couldn't really swap along the way anyway.
Yeah, that too.
Yeah. Okay, so the one other story I wanted to say, what was it? Because I said, there was one other story. I'm going to kick myself if I don't remember what.
I think you were going to go down the route of when we ended up in that deserted, empty town.
That's it. Well done.
So actually the final story of the episode.
Okay. So the final story of this episode will be, whilst we were in California, Rachel was driving at this point. So in the debate of which one of us is the better driver, I wasn't the one that took us into a ghost town. And if people don't know what a ghost town is, basically, we followed the sat nav that Rachel had taken from England, and it led us down like a street where all of the houses on both sides were deserted, broken windows, boarded up doors, and things like this. It felt like the scariest place, and like I didn't get any footage of it. I was also using my phone as a sat nav, which was actually a lot more accurate out there. But I was like, we need to keep moving, because you could just feel that even though it was deserted, we were not the only people in that area. Would you agree?
Yeah, it was also the point where the tarmac ended and we just ended up like on a dirt track trying to do a 3-point turn to turn around. But no, I agree that probably wasn't one of the best, most scenic areas to have spent too much time in.
No, so we got out of the ghost town quite quickly, and it was like, okay, so this is an example of when you can end up like in a scary part of, or like the bad part of town, or just somewhere that's deserted, where you can imagine, again, there might be gangs, there might be like drug deals. It would have looked a perfect film set for, again, some sort of zombie apocalypse or just like gang warfare movie. And we ended up in the middle of that. Okay, one final story though, because otherwise it will never become relevant again. We stopped in San Andreas. And San Andreas, which, if you don't know what San Andreas is, it's the thing that's mentioned when they talk about like the San Andreas fault line, where like if there's going to be a massive earthquake in America, then the San Andreas between San Francisco and what's Andreas bit mean? Or whatever. But it's this tiny town. It's the tiny town where this fault is named after. And it's so small that we were looking for somewhere to just like stop and have a pit stop. And it's like, oh, San Andreas, I've heard of that. And when we stopped there was like a little, like a gas station. and they sold like live worms in there that you could get for fishing, I guess. But there was this car pulled up alongside us. Rach, do you want to say anything about the inhabitants?
You tell the story far better than I do.
Okay,
But
so
I'm sure they were lovely people.
yeah, I'm sure they were lovely people. But if you've ever watched an episode of The Simpsons, you know Cletus the slack-jawed yokel. Um, then like they opened the car door and there was like clucking of chickens coming from within, and there was this mother and this dad and one or two children, and it's like dang it, boy, you gotta eat your what was it, glowworms or something, I forget now. It's like, you what, crickets? If you don't eat your crickets, you don't even get some chocolate sauce or something like this, they said. And like when they opened the car door, just like loads of objects, their possessions, their life possessions, all just tumbled out onto the ground. And when they were going to leave, the car was filthy, but like the mother of the family was literally just banging on the side of the car to try and get it going. And then as they drove away, we could just hear like of chickens clucking. So yeah, mountain men.
Yeah, their car could have done with a bit of a clean and maybe be mended so it actually worked and didn't have bits falling off.
Yeah, absolutely. Wasn't like our car, who we named.
We did get very fond of our cars in America.
Yeah, we named him. Are we going to share? Or is he a private baby? Sorry?
You can say his name.
Yeah, his name was Chuck. We called him Chuck because we thought he was a suitably American-sounding name, or at least a name that you'll get in America, but that you don't get here. So we had Chuck, and then we had, for some reason, the theme of all of our American cars is they seem to end in like a K sound. We had Chuck, we had Brock, and then because it was actually on the name of on the license plate, we then had Bock, which isn't like a proper name. But is there a Bock in Wicked, the musical?
Yeah, the Munchkin boy.
Yeah. So we had Chuck, Brock, and Bock. So, you know, I don't know what we'll end up with next, but he's going to have to follow that theme. Okay, Rach, I think we wrap this one up here. Any final thoughts on driving in America, road trips?
This has just made me really want to go again. I really want to go to the Grand Canyon and do a road trip around Arizona, Monument Valley. That's so super high on my list. And
the Grand Canyon wasn't the whole point of our San Francisco trips that we could go to the Grand Canyon, Rachel?
It was, but it's quite. We didn't really have that much time. Just with like the amount of time that both of us could take off work, so we decided to do the coast and Yosemite, which are a lot closer to San Francisco. Because the Grand Canyon, even though it's still the US, distances there are huge, so it would have taken days to drive there.
Wow. And interestingly, the Grand Canyon was created when a meteorite hit the Earth, isn't that right? Well, anyway, I stick to my guns on that one. So, everyone watching at home, this has been the Jet Lagged and Loving It podcast. By all means, do check out the Jet Lagged and Loving It travel vlog series, which is on YouTube. We're going to have some new episodes of that coming up very soon with some of the places we've been to that we haven't shared yet. Obviously, things are on lockdown.
Pre-lockdown, yeah.
Pre-lockdown places. But we're going to have some post-lockdown places, which I'm so excited about as soon as lockdown ends. And we'll work out perhaps between ourselves, obviously, but also on a future episode. We spoke about our bucket lists on last week's podcast, but we'll work out where we're going. I think Canada is up on the list, along with Latvia. Is that right? Latvia. I almost went to say, what was the other place? Not Liechtenstein. What's the Luxembourg? Oh, yeah. Is the ironically not super exciting sounding place, but I'm sure they're very lovely people. So, yeah, it will either be Canada, Latvia, or Luxembourg. Not Luxembourg. Okay, but also during lockdown, check out. See, it should have been called Locked Down and Loving It. I just didn't know that Locked Down was going to be the popular term. But our spin-off about what's happening during coronavirus is called Locked In and Loving It. So check out that because we had a new episode up yesterday at the time of recording. And these are all parts of the Extreme Improv podcast network and Extreme Improv YouTube channel. So go to www.youtube.com/Extreme Improv or facebook.com/Extreme Improv to be able to find the links to all of these podcasts, including this one in video form and many, many others. Did you have a final thought, Rach?
I'm hungry and I want Denny's.
Okay, we're going to go to get some virtual Denny's in a moment. I'm going to have a peanut butter milkshake.
Can't wait.
Okay, so until next time, thank you so much, and bye-zes for now. Bye.